Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take on this Tuesday morning, and I got to tell you something. Yesterday in the market was absolutely on fire. We loved what we were seeing yesterday. Another nice sharp move to the upside. We were up a little higher early on in the Dow. We actually continued to move in the positive spot, but we did get off of those highs, finishing up just underneath about 100 points to the upside. NASDAQ, on the other hand, just accelerated throughout the session. A really nice performance yesterday, up nearly 100 points, 97 points for the NASDAQ yesterday, and a lot of that coming from a lot of different areas, but energy certainly a part of this whole thing. It's been really, really interesting to watch as the price of oil got back up in that area of about 84 bucks. And you take a look at over at the energy stocks, and in the big scheme of things, they were up about 1.5%, almost 2% yesterday. A nice solid move out of energy yesterday. Consumer discretionary also having a pretty good day. But I'll tell you what, you look over at the 10-year, yep, don't even hardly have to look, because it's basically been planted right here in this sort of area where it is right now. We'll call it 156, somewhere in that sort of area. And that seems to be where it's been just sort of stuck. We did have brief move up, that pull back, and then here we are once again where we were before, with Bitcoin also trading around 61,000. So when I look back and I look and we bring it up each and every day, I'm bringing it up today. How about those volumes yesterday? How about them Cowboys? Well, how about that volume? 40.8 million contracts yesterday trading once again. What was the leader? Who's been the leader? I talked about it yesterday. If you watch the halftime report, Tesla. Tesla leading once again, almost 2.5 million contracts trading yesterday in Tesla. Apple was the only other over 1 million contracts yesterday. And by the way, Ford, which continues to move to the upside, also continues to have an enormous amount of options trading in Ford, almost like a meme stock. It's been a pretty extraordinary run to the upside. And when we're seeing that consistency of volume of trade coming in to the options in Ford and certainly swayed towards the bullish side, been a really, really nice run, something that has to be pointed out. I know I talk about the EV stocks all the time. Great to see Ford, and obviously they're pushing themselves towards EV and pushing into the future and all of the things that people are so excited about with the CEO and all the conversation there. But speaking of that space, how about Tesla yesterday? An absolutely extraordinary run to the upside. That was up about 8.5% yesterday. Boeing had a really nice day. The Chinese names all started to move to the upside. We talk about it. One step forward, not so much two steps back anymore, but one step forward, one step back, maybe another step back. Then we come forward and just moving around. Yesterday, I'm taking a look and I see PDD, I see Baidu, I see NetEase. You're talking about up 5% or more across the board for these Chinese names. So seeing a lot of activity there. A little bit of a change today. We'll touch on that in just a second. CrowdStrike yesterday, down nearly 4.5%, 5%. Why? Because they had a downgrade yesterday from one of the analysts on the street, definitely getting a little bit of a press. But this is a stock that if you take a look at that chart, you can sort of understand it's up there somewhere in the ether, in the sky. It's been on a really, really impressive move to the upside. So we're at these record highs. Can we continue to extend upon them? Well, the markets today, when you look at them, they're just not moving a lot. But yes, we are at record levels. You take a look over at the S&P. Looks pretty strong. I take a look at the Dow. The Dow started the day up about 30, maybe almost 40 points, pulled back, got into negative territory. Now it bounced back once again. But we're talking about in a very, very tight 30, 40 point range from yesterday's close. And I look over at the NASDAQ, sort of the same sort of a thing, just a back and forth, up, down, but call it 20 or 30 points from the flat line. So not a whole lot of movement early on, which explains why we're seeing the volatility index, which was 16.5, start to come back down. Yesterday, we were over 17 for about that long, starting to move a little bit to the downside. Today, we're looking at that 16 level, and wouldn't be surprised if we get into the 15s if this keeps up. Very, very tight, much more constricted movement, at least in this first hour. Obviously, things can change pretty rapidly. The 10-year, yeah, you guessed it, 155. And I take a look over at crude, 83.5. We were talking about 84. That's why energy was down a little bit early, kind of moved back. It's sort of in that flat area. Technology still kind of hanging on a little bit. It's not making monstrous moves, although material space is looking a little bit stronger today. Consumer discretionary, a little bit of pressure there, but not a whole lot of movement when we look across at all the various sectors that are pushing these markets around. That's why we're seeing such a tight market, I think, early on. We talk about this EV space a lot. I'm taking a look over at Tesla. Tesla was down big early, and then it just started to rally all the way back. And the last I looked, it was down about 2%, but it was down significantly lower early. We'll see. Obviously had a monstrous day yesterday. We've been talking about Tesla and how fast it's moved from the lower 800s in terms of the dollar amount of the shares all the way up to where we are now, pushing on those 1200 levels in a very, very short period of time. So we've watched a pretty violent move to the upside there. NIO having a pretty good day. Most of the EV space a little bit into negative territory, but I see NIO up there about 2.5%. Pfizer, strong earnings. That stock was up 4% early on. Then you take a look over at Under Armour. Now this is one that, you don't oftentimes hear me talk much about Nike. There's a variety of reasons for that. I think it's overpriced and there's a lot more to it than that. But Under Armour, and what do we see much more frequently hitting on unusual option activity? The stream of Under Armour hits that were bullish over the last week and a half, 2 weeks coming into these numbers was pretty extraordinary once again. And boy, were they right. Stock up about 17% today. They not only beat, but they also raised. And that's always something that we're looking forward to. We love to hear what the numbers are, but we always want to know, well, what does it look like going forward? And that big raise gave that stock a really nice lift today. Cisco up about 3%. Marvell up about 3%. But I go back over to those Chinese names. We talked about the one step forward. That was yesterday. Now we're taking that step back. Baidu down about 4%, and across the board seeing some of the Chinese names under a little bit more pressure. So I got two unusuals. We're out of here. Bit Digital. We've talked about this one in the past. Now we talk about Bitcoin miners. This is BTBT if you don't know the symbol here. And Glenn does a great job of putting all this up. So stock trading right around 1280, 6,500 of this week's expiring 13 calls. So stock was trading somewhere, call it between 12 and a half and 1280. And then we see those 13 calls getting bought that expire this weekend, 40 cents up to about 80 cents for those options, 6,500 of those. We've seen this name hit in the past. We know what's been going on with Bitcoin and that entire space in terms of crypto. So something to keep an eye on because we're seeing a little bit more starting to show up. Matter of fact, today we're seeing a little bit more on the crypto side, definitely showing up on unusual option activity. I got one more. And speaking of that, many of the chip names, as we know, are part of this entire thing when we talk about crypto, whether you look at NVIDIA, AMD, some of these names are definitely contributors there. AMD is my next one. Stock's trading right around 126, not too far from all-time highs. 14,700 of the AMD this week expiring 127s. It's not going to have to make a huge move to get there, but the 127s very aggressively being bought for $1.35 up to about, call it $1.80. So aggressively positioning there. Once again, we've seen these same numbers in the past coming in and buying an AMD. Oftentimes they've been right. We talk about this though as well. Those rolls as they go to the upside, eventually they're not going to work. But if we can catch them along the early segment and if it continues that kind of movement, I'll tell you what, AMD has been a great example of that. We've seen it in the past where it's made some huge runs to the upside. We'll see whether or not these are able to contribute to that as well, but it's always good to see. It seems like it might even be the interpretation of the same trader or the same group, whatever the case may be, buying into these calls like we've seen in the past. So we'll see if this one's going to be right or not, but strong buying there at AMD. Folks, have a great day of trading. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.